And we're live. Rick Earp, welcome to the show, man. So excited to have you here.
Thanks, buddy. Known you for
Uh,
years.
I
Too bad
know.
to be apart.
It's kind of crazy. Like, I get excited about interviewing my friends because, when you're buddies, you can't do kind of like a long form interview with one of your friends, right? It's like it's a different relationship.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had like a 2, 3 hour conversation with a friend. It's always ad hoc, right? Text message here, text message there, quick phone call here.
Right. Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. You have a very unique story that I believe is going to resonate incredibly well with our audience. And so this show is really the output of me kind of getting angry about social media and specifically a bunch of these fake business gurus that are out there selling motivation like snake oil. They sell a bunch of platitudes and tell you a bunch of BS and make you feel warm and fuzzy, but ultimately it doesn't move you forward. And many of them turn around and try to sell you courses or sell you tickets to hear them speak. And I just got really angry about all of that. And the reason I got angry about it is because I, much like you, at an early age was hungry, really hungry, and would have probably fallen for a lot of that stuff, right? We probably would have bought those get rich
Yeah.
quick courses. And your story is really interesting because you've been able to achieve a high level of success at an early age in life, doing it really through grinding. But before we get into all that, tell people a little bit about what you do now, what your job title is. I know you can't say exactly around certain things, but maybe talk about a little bit some of the projects that you've worked on with AWS.
Yeah, I've spent about 13 years in technology, ranging anywhere from Verizon's to AT&T's to EMC, which got acquired by Dell, and now over at Amazon. Probably the last 11 years, I've been in a sales capacity. So, consulting with anyone from Fortune 500 companies all the way to the government on, large scale projects, some things that you use in your everyday life today, other things that you just completely take for granted. And AWS today focused on our game tech portfolio. So trying to power some of the next big games out there, such as your Fortnites and your Red Dead Redemptions and so on and so forth.
That sounds pretty amazing. And through that journey, you've been able to create some wealth for you and your family and really secure yourself, and not just you and your spouse, but really your extended family, right? Being able to take care of them a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think probably one of the most crowning achievements is I think I was about 24 years old and I was able to buy my grandma a house. So I think that's probably one thing I hang my hat on the most.
That's a huge deal, man. That's a mega deal. And you're a very humble guy, but I'm trying to get you to brag a little bit because I want people to see what they can achieve if they just simply buckle down, focus, and grind. Right. And one of the problems that I've seen on the show is that I've brought on some, look, we've had Navy SEALs, we've had best-selling authors, we've had NBA players, NFL players, rappers, race car drivers. Okay, all that sounds so fantastical, right? It's like, well, yeah, that's them. I can't. I'm a regular guy. I can't become Marco Andretti. I can't become Antonio Cromartie or Jason Redman on the SEAL teams. I can't do that. It's not me. But what you did is extremely difficult, but very achievable, right? And creates wealth and security from a really tough upbringing. And so there's a nice segue. Where were you born, man? Tell me kind of your origin story.
My origin story, I think, is more like a nightmare to most. But as a kid, I didn't know any better, so it doesn't sound terrible to me. But the more times I say it out loud, the more I realize that it's probably not that good. Was born in Palmdale, California. So you're probably only familiar with Palmdale for two things. Afro Man wrote a song about us, and ideally, it's one of the cities and why the DEA exists. There's not a lot of good things going on in Palmdale. About 2 weeks before I was born, my father gets arrested, ends up doing life in jail I'm born about 2 weeks later, single mom. Mom was fantastic. We're living in a pretty rundown area. I remember, from basically being 0 to about 6 years old, sleeping in a bathtub because we had so many drive-bys in the neighborhood. My mom thought it would be best that I sleep in a cast iron bathtub. But to me, I didn't know any better. To me, she told me it was a pirate ship, right? So I'm sleeping in my pirate ship every single night, playing with my toys in it. I don't know the difference. Um, you know, Things with my dad and things that he was involved in, at the time started getting a little bit precarious in Los Angeles. And, myself and my mother started receiving a lot of death threats. So we had to effectively pick up and move. So we went one rung slightly up the ladder and we moved to Sacramento. So my mom got a job as a nurse, life was good. We had our own place. It was a small duplex, but, to me, it was a mansion and I had a bed, not a bathtub. So, I'm coming up in the game.
Living large.
Yeah, I'm living fat at this point. So mom and dad separate. She meets this other guy. He turns out to be okay for like the first period of time. About 6 months later, turns out that he's a drug addict. Super violent. Now we're going through this 2-year stint of, God, man, I remember just getting beat up every single day, scars on my back. You said to my mom, one day I decide, I've watched a lot of Ninja Turtles. I got like this, like Michelangelo baton, type thing. And I've had enough, right? And I know the moves. I've seen the cartoons. So I run up, boom, whack him with it. It's like a movie, where like the little guy hits the big guy and he just like turns around slowly. And you knew in that moment that in that moment,
Yep.
I upped up. Just rails me, just knocks me out, cold. So, dealt with that for years and years and years. And then, my mom gets esophageal cancer. So stage 4, terminal. Since he's a great guy, he decides to leave because he doesn't want to deal with it. So, I remember going to the chemo treatments with her, for like a year, having to like, pour what the best I could say it looks like is like a slim fast. Essentially, have to pour that in her feeding tube, every single day at that point. And, she passes away and my grandma, effectively adopts me and I go live with her and, things just get chronically worse. Everything from I found out I have a tumor in my head. I need to get rushed into effectively emergency surgery. What I thought my grandpa was a good guy, turns out he's not. He's also kind of a drug addict. So now it's just, effectively me and my grandma. She's raising me and we're doing it all off of, essentially Social Security and welfare. And it just, the trials and tribulations just continued all the way through,
So give me some ages here, some mile markers, because you're going quick and I appreciate that. But, give me some age markers, because this is going to help set up the framework of mindset to go from complete chaos, which is something you and I privately talk about all about, is sort of where we are happiest or most calm when shit is just going nuts. And that's not necessarily a good thing. It sounds cool, but it's actually a kind of a bad thing, because it means you inherently are attracted to more chaos. So there's downsides to that. But I digress. Give me some age markers here.
Yeah, negative 2 weeks old. Dad goes to prison, effectively for life. About 4 or 5, we move out of Palmdale due to death threats. Make it to Sacramento at about 5, 6. Go through a couple years of abuse through that nature. At about 6 to 7, mom gets esophageal cancer. She ended up lasting maybe 4 or 5 months. Effectively after that, go move in with my grandma right around age 7. And then about 6 months after that, come to find out, my grandpa's is a drug addict as well. So now it's just effectively, me and her, and that's where.
Do they stay together? Like, how does that work? How does the home life work for you? Because at that age, what's a drug addict? Like, when you're so young, you don't have any sort of relative right? You're not like, okay, this guy knows
Yeah.
drugs bad. That's why like, you can't do that math, right? You're just like, I don't understand why all adults are authorities at a young age. And so when they start acting kind of weird, as a small child, you have this sort of disassociative process where you're like, oh, you in your mind go, well, they're an adult, so whatever they're doing, they must be doing the right thing because you're such a small child.
I didn't have any concept, that was kind of the thing, when I got older, I could remember looking back to, them getting into arguments because, he said he had a hole in his pocket, lost $300 from his check. Or I remember like riding in the car, riding in the truck, and there was like these like metal PVC pipes, like welded together, and it looked like an L. Now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, that's clearly know what that is functionally used for. But I just thought that was a tool, when he was a kid, because he did construction. So I thought like, hey, it's like a plumbing tool, effectively. So like I wasn't really aware, and I mean, my grandma did a pretty good job of trying to like shelter that piece off. I just thought that's how people were. Like I thought that they were just like awake for 2 or 3 days and like in a really good mood, had a lot of energy, and then they just would like sleep for a couple days. I just You're naive at 7 years old. Like you don't know what good and bad is. Like,
Right. That's actually, sorry, I want to pause there. So that's actually really important because those memories, those things that happen to people at that age when you're so young, they mark your experience. And so let me define it in a different way. Does having $100 make you rich? Well, it's all relative. It's very subjective, right? If I take you to Ethiopia, $100 is can be a meaningful amount of money, right? If I take you to Manhattan, it's enough for a couple lattes, right? So it's a very relative thing. And so why I bring that up is you're actually setting your moment of relevance, right? So this is now your framework. This is how you view the world. And now everything that happens thereafter is based on that mark. Now, if you had been a little bit older and come from the Brady bunch, right? This happy, perfect married couple, everything. You've got money and food and life is good. And then that thing happens to you. Then even at a young age, you have the cognizant awareness to go, okay, that ain't right. Something's broken here. But when you have the opposite of that, you, as a young child, you assume whatever level of wealth you have or don't have, that's what everyone has. Whatever level of stress or craziness you have, that's what everyone has, right? So okay, just wanted to pause and kind of make that clear because this will build on our way out. Okay, so now grandma and grandpa stay together. You're now what, 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, at about that age. And then just as the years progress on, lose more family members, whether that's related to drugs, to suicides, at that point. And I just thought that's how things were, like when you had uncles, overdoses, or aunts commit suicide, uncles, commit suicide. I just thought that's the way things were. I mean, we were really poor, but kind of go back to what you said, like I didn't realize I was poor until I was like 14. I can remember when I got into middle school, and at the time everyone was wearing Abercrombie, and I went home and I was like, I want this Abercrombie shirt, which I would never be caught dead in now. But we went to the mall and the shirt was $45, and I had no context of like what $45 was. I was a kid, and like we just couldn't afford that. So I didn't even realize that, poverty was a thing. To that end, I think it was my grandma thought it was really important that I still maintain a relationship, with my father. So it was probably every other weekend, I was down in death row, going through all the security gates. I can still remember all 5 checkpoints, vividly to this day, and, visiting with him. I can remember sitting 2 feet from, Richard Ramirez, the LA Night Stalker. He in fact drew me stuff on a paper napkin, and he handed it over to me. And I remember asking my dad, like, hey, why is he here? And he's like, he did some bad things. Like, that's not a good guy. But I didn't know. I remember and it wasn't until I got much older that I started kind of like looking back at my past, and I was like, that was weird. Like,
Bad run.
having the LA Night Stalker drawing you ducks and swans, I thought it was fantastic when I was a kid. But I had no context of oh my
course,
God, this is who this guy was.
this is the most
This,
terrible human being. Yeah.
yeah, but this is just like kind of the basis for my childhood. I thought everyone just went and visited. I didn't know it was weird that you didn't hang out in death row every weekend. Like the security guards are super nice to me. All the other inmates are super nice to me. Like it was recess to me. I didn't know any better.
Right.
And
so this is one of those funny things that this is going to sound like a platitude, but I hopefully because of your story, people will understand that there's real value to this. One of my favorite things I ever learned from a buddy who is a former Navy SEAL, Jason Redman, he always likes to say, if you don't mind, it don't matter, right? Mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. And I really, really love that because from your perspective, you didn't mind at all. They were like, cool, I'm going to go see Pops. People are nice to me. The security guard gives me the fist bump. Hey guys, what's happening? Like life is good. Someone who quote unquote does mind, right? They know the complexity and the morbidity of that situation. They're going to mind a lot. They're going to be anxiety ridden and not want to do it and feel very uncomfortable, et cetera. But you're in there straight swagging, chilling. And the reason is because the way your brain has been wired to go, well, this is no big deal. You didn't mind. Now, this is a really extreme, morbid version of that. But when you apply that to, let's say, being in financial dire straits, you lost your job and bills are due. If you and the anxiety and stress of not having enough money to pay rent can overwhelm a lot of people. And some studies were actually done around farmers and the decisions that farmers would make when they had a bad crop versus when they had a good crop. And when they had a good crop, they would make better decisions. And when they had a bad crop, they would panic and make worse decisions, right? So this is sort of proven that depending on how your brain is viewing the circumstances that you're in, completely dictate the output, which is, look, that little synopsis is why I wanted you on the show. Okay, so
yeah, I mean, I can agree more with that. To be honest, I think everyone always would tell me, and to this day, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry for you," and I'm like, I don't understand why. Like, I didn't know any better, so like, I can't be sorry for myself.
no.
And I look back at everything that happened. And I'm like, you know what? Like, there's a huge silver lining to this. Like, all of that. It set a bar for like where my stress levels and panic levels, or what I think is a bad thing, is so high. And
Yes.
that's just been such a benefit to me throughout life. It's just, I don't rattle. I can endure an absolute ton.
Dude, is that, sorry to interrupt, is that not like the thing that you and I connected about the most?
Yeah. I mean, I can take a lot of punishment.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but I've taken what is a bad hand and I've turned it into what's my most valuable asset, effectively.
Life happens for you, not to you.
Yeah.
Right. And that you are the embodiment of that. And we're going to get towards, building you back up out of this story. So it's not just a bummer the whole sesh, but, what Rick is being very nice right now. And I'm going to be not nice for Rick, which is he has gone through just a very difficult, that's an understatement, terrible upbringing. And he's being really nice and humble about it. But I'm telling you, if you go through hell, to quote Winston Churchill, keep going. And Rick did that. But the thing that Rick sees out of it, it's the same thing that I see out of my upbringing, which is it puts this, I don't even want to say chip on your shoulder or fire in your belly, because it's actually more than that. Like, I'm going to speak for Rick for a second, because I know he and I share this commonality, which is when it gets real, when the stress gets ratcheted up, I'm talking like dire circumstances, right? You almost get goosebumps and pumped because you're like, awesome, now I get to fight. Like, now I get to jack you up. Like, it's a weird, it's not a healthy response. I just want to be very clear with everyone. It might sound cool, doesn't come from a good place, but it can be highly, highly effective, because when you get beaten down, you just go, all right, bring it on. Like, now it's time to go. Like, you step up your game, your mind gets sharper. Like, you almost get excited that the stress is coming down, and you're like, your hands go up. Most people panic. Most people pause. They ask help. They can't sleep. They lose their appetite. Like, guys like you and I are like, finally we get to fight. Like let's go. Like, you just like, best way I can describe it is like there's almost a bloodlust for it to some degree, because it's the chaos that you grew up in. It's that relative mark of like, it's always been an S storm. That's where I actually feel the most comfortable. So when it happens, you're like, cool, I'm in my element, right? It's sort of being comfortable can sometimes feel uncomfortable for guys like you and I.
Yeah, I can agree with that more. I mean, I remember right around I was like 8, 9 years old. I was running away from school. I was acting out, I was getting into fights. I just went through a lot, and being then just thrust into like this suburban, school system with all these rules. I mean, I didn't have rules. I didn't go to school. My mom didn't make me go to school. I didn't have to come home when the street lights were on, because there was no parent that was home when I came home. I just did whatever I want.
Yep.
So then to be put into like this mold of like, now there's all these rules and modalities that I have to follow. Like I bucked that like crazy. So I remember my grandma at the time, she decided like, hey, we're going to put you in therapy. And that was the moment that changed my life. Not therapy, because I didn't like it. I didn't like the lady. But I remember 4 or 5 sessions in, she kept repeating the same thing to me over and over. She's like, you need to listen to me. You need to listen to me, and you need to do this arbitrary task. Think like eat dots, or tell me how you feel in a picture, whatever. And that's just, I think I was too calloused at that age to just ascribe, to that style of thinking. But I realized it's good for a lot of people, just not me. And every single time she would always tell me that. She's like, you need to listen to me, because, with the parent in jail or parents in drugs, you are 5 to 6 times more likely to end up in jail or on drugs. And I remember like on the 5th session, I just had it with this lady and just popped off, because to me, it was like, she was telling me I was going to be a statistic. And I just hated the idea of that. And it's much like that like iconic Good Will Hunting scene where he's like, do you think because I read Oliver Twist, I have any idea what it's like to be an orphan? And that was the moment that I had with this woman. It's like, just because you've read some study doesn't mean that you know where I'm going to end up. And that was the moment in my mind like where I kind of like, I flipped and I said, I'm going to be better, because everyone thinks that I can't be better. And what drove me from a young age, which isn't healthy, was to spite this woman.
100%.
Effectively.
It's a super effective tool.
And I don't think she remembers me. It was like 4 30-minute sessions. Like, I apologize to this woman, but like that was my motivation from there. And good thing is my grandma came from the school of hard knocks. So she said, all right, well, if therapy doesn't work, let's get you into combat sports. And I'd say that's what saved me. Just growing up doing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, competing every single weekend for like 7, 8 years. So when you say like you like that fight moment, that is where I felt the most comfortable. I grew
100%.
up in chaos. So when you put me in a chaotic environment, I actually felt my stress levels just go way down. Like, it was not dealing with struggle or chaos stresses me out. I need some to relax. And I think that's probably a hard thing for most people to grapple with, but I need to feel like my back's against the wall every now and then, or I get really uncomfortable.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like you're talking like right to me, because I couldn't agree more. I mean, like I'm getting like choked up just thinking about it, because I did the same thing, right? Like, I got into martial arts at the right time, and that 100% saved my life, and it's why I'm where I am today. And the thing you said about being comfortable getting hit, right? Like, you're rolling and getting tapped out and you're fighting, and like, that feels great. Like, that feels like so good. It reminds me the MMA fighter, Tim Kennedy, right? He made this comment to me one day where he said, and he said it multiple times, but he said, The difference between a fighter and a warrior is a warrior likes to get hit. Like he enjoys the hit. Like that's like in a very perverse way of motivation. So okay, so now you've resigned yourself to use the power of spite to just smash this woman by being better. Now you're cruising through high school. How do you do in school, grade wise and attendance and all that stuff?
Oh man. So grade wise, I was always fantastic. I think I ended out high school at like a 3.8 GPA. I was in the GATE program, which is the overachievers program, at least here in Northern California, all through middle school and high school. It's just that I didn't know how to control my emotions. So like I was constantly getting into fights, constantly getting in trouble, ended up being sent to private school, kind of a Christian school. That's where I kind of finished out, high school, and just got into a slurry of fights, throughout. Almost got expelled. Didn't graduate high school 2 weeks, before the end of high school, which he swung first, I swung better. I was the one that got in trouble. It's just go figure how that works in life.
Yep.
And, when I got done with high school, I was staring down the barrel of, do I want to go to college? And I went for about 6 months and I decided, I don't want to do this. Like, this just doesn't seem like what I want to do.
Right.
And I got a job in sales. At the time it was Singular. I was selling cell phones, right? And I think it was $14 an hour plus commission. And that was kind of when I realized, like, I'm good at sales. Like, sales to me is no different than fight. It's negotiation, winner take all. I'm like, I like this. So I became captivated by it and started making $7,000-8,000 a month in commission selling cell phones. So I'm like, why would I go to college?
What age is this?
19.
Okay, so that's still a shit ton of money. Excuse my language, but
Yeah.
That's still a lot of money for a 19-year-old. Like, that's real money. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic. I traded in my car, which at the time was like a 1994 base model Contour, Spider-Man antenna ball. Bought a BMW. I don't know if it was the smartest purchase at 19 years old. And why they lent me the money, I don't know why either. But I did that. Then I would always see these guys coming in suits. They were. And I realized that they did outside sales. And I was like, oh, what's that? And they're like, well, it's just sales like you're doing today, but you don't have to do it in this retail environment. Like, you can just work with businesses. And I'm like, oh, does that pay more? And they're like, yeah, it pays like a lot more.
Like 5x more.
Yeah. So I spent about 2 more years building up my sales resume. And as I would meet customers, like, I learned the value of networking, right? So like I always made sure that I focused on the customer more than anything. Like, I'm not going to sell you something like a used car. Like, I'm going to find whatever value you need, and I'm going to deliver it to you, and I'm going to be here and, and help you out whenever you need it. And I met a lot of really kind of good mentors along the way. And I happened to meet one that was in the technology space at one of the top 10 technology companies in the world. And he said, you should get into outside sales and do tech. I was like, yeah, I should do that. I didn't know what I meant. Didn't know, that. So he gets me an interview with this gentleman, Brad. He's the district manager of a company called EMC. Just recently got bought by Dell about 3 years ago. And we sit down, we interview. First question, he goes, did you go to college? I said, no. He's like, do you know anything about technology? I'm like, I know how an iPhone works. And he's like, have you ever sold to a business? I'm like, no. So I'm bombing this interview. Right.
Completely fire and brimstone bombing, like
and
no survivors.
He goes, then he makes this comment, and like this comment I think is where like it changed the trajectory of my life. He goes, well, you know what, this is a really high stress, high performing job. It's pretty cutthroat. I don't think you have what it takes, and you should always be polite in an interview. But at that moment, he triggered something in me. when he said, you're not going to be able to handle the stress. You're not going to be able to handle the chaos and stuff like that. And I kind of just unloaded on him / vented on him and said, look, man, this is what I've been through. This is what I've dealt with, and kind of punctuated with it off of like, if you think a job is going to stress me out,
you have no clue.
I've been through exponentially worse, and this is absolute child play to me.
Yeah.
And he kind of gave me this just like weird look. And, you know, we ended the interview and that was it. And I'm like, man, I really screwed that up. He called me back 2 days later and he's like, I want to hire you. Just solely based on like the fire that like I presented him. So it turns out he was a former quarterback at Clemson, former football coach. And he told me, he's like, you know, it always comes down to lack of skill or lack of will. He goes, you know, you clearly have the will, and that's something that can't be taught. He goes, you don't have the skill, but that's something that can be taught. And that was my first foray into technology. And I'll never forget getting that offer letter at like 24 years old. And I'm like, well, there's commas in my salary.
Yeah.
Never seen a comma before.
Dose.
Yeah. And, you know, so now I'm making multiples of 6 figures at this point. And I'm still living at home with my grandma. So I have no bills or anything to pay. You know, she falls on tough times, and that was the gateway that, you know, bought our house, you know, with that money.
That's amazing, man. And there's a lot to pick apart there. So let's do exactly that. So you found sales to be where you could manifest your own destiny the best. And you didn't have a silver spoon. You didn't go to an Ivy League college, or even college to speak of. And yet you were able, through tenacity, networking, and betting on yourself, to build that up. Now, just to be clear, Rick didn't do that in 6 months. Okay, everybody, this took years of him working there and showing up on time, crushing sales, being a leader, even at a relatively low position at the company at 19, 20 years old, and doing that week after week, month after month, year after year, expanding his network both internally at the company, because those people know other people at other companies, as well as crushing it with customers, because those were successful people. So he was able to extend that network out. But that personal momentum, that waking up early, getting it done day in and day out, it's slow to build. It takes time to build. This is not get rich quick, get promoted in 3 months and make $250,000. That's not this. You know, he abbreviated his story for the podcast, but there's years of building that up to have that opportunity, which he went for all in. He was fortunate that all of those things played together at that moment. But make no mistake, if he hadn't gotten hired at 24, he would have gotten hired at 25, right? So it's just an inevitable conclusion, because he had done all the right things building up to that. So, you know, a big part of this podcast, we try to get granular. Right. I don't want sort of 50,000 viewpoints on what people did to become successful. Like I want to share with our audience, like exactly what steps that you took, because I want people to walk away feeling inspired and motivated and connected to you and to the story. But I also want them to come away and going, okay, that's what it took for him to be successful. I'm going to do those things also. Right. And one of the problems with this sort of motivational movement that's happening within social media is it's all fluff. It makes you feel good, but doesn't give you any action steps, right? And I'm sure people are tired of hearing me say this, but my least favorite trope in the entire world is believe and you will succeed. Well, great. Now I believe and I feel great. What do I do next? Right? It doesn't give you anything actionable. So it's not easy, but it's easily explained how, when working at Singular, you were able to work hard, crush your sales, which made you money, got you noticed by your boss, which also means you were delivering customer value. That built out your network. That got you the interview. You crushed the interview. Then what? It's day one on the job where you have, frankly, no idea what you're doing. How does that look? What do you start doing at that point?
Oh man, it was weird. So I remember driving down San Francisco, first day, on the job, get introduced to the entire team. And boss at the time goes, "Here, I want you to shadow XYZ person." And this, I remember sitting with them and, we're doing cold calls, prospecting, and he's kind of explaining to me how we sell the product and how the motion and everything works. And he asked me a question. He's like, "So where'd you go to college?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't." And he goes, "Where did you work in tech before?" I'm like, "I didn't." And he gave me this just like bewildered look, like on his face. And he like leaned over to me. I'll never forget his comment. He goes, "Bro, you shouldn't be here." He goes, "So like you got to crush it."
Right.
And it was the most honest thing like anyone like had told me. Because I looked around at everyone else on the team and, they've come from like, Penn State to Cornell, they had done an internship for a year. They spent a year in inside sales after they got their master's, all these different things. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like I should be here at this point. So I obsessed, I was terrified that this was going to get taken away from me. Like I already had so much stuff ripped from me, across the years that I was afraid that this could. So that's kind of what motivated me. Fear is what motivated me. And I set out to like, I'm going to figure out exactly how this product works, exactly how the value position of it is. And I'm going to read every single book I can on outside sales, enterprise sales. I was reading about sociology, just all these different, things around like economics, how to master ROI, TCO. And, I agree with you. There isn't really like a get rich method or speaker. But when I look back at it, if anyone nails it, it's Jocko, right? Discipline equals freedom. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's essentially what I did is I just wrote a plan, worked the plan, and then was just disciplined enough to spend hours and hours and hours a day just working the plan. And mainly it was because I wanted to feel like I belonged there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That is so easy for listeners to tune out, to go, you don't understand my situation. You don't understand me, right? I'm different because ... And that's your ego talking. That's people's ego coming up and chirping in their ear saying that, oh, that worked for Rick. That worked for Jocko. That worked for Pierre. Doesn't work for me because I'm different. I have these combination of problems. And if you find yourself doing that, you need to stop. You need to reflect, because the point is that you're not any different. We are not any different. It's all the same. If you put together a half-assed, half-baked, terribly thought out plan and you grind at it every day, you will be far, far more successful than if you have all the natural talent in the world and you watch Netflix and eat Cheetos all day. That's just the reality, right? So your plan could have been trash, but you woke up every single day and chipped away at it. And the consistency of doing that and being dedicated to your craft and being smart enough to go, I don't know anything, like that's a real skill. And I'm going to quick rant about VC because I'm a former VC guy who does nothing but talk trash about VC. It's this huge group of people who think they already know everything, despite the fact that 2/3 of their investments go to zero. Think about how crazy that is. You talk to VC guys, they got all the answers. They know everything. They've got an opinion on politics, on tech, you name it, they got it. But yet they're wrong 70-ish% of the time, 75% of the time, right? That's ego, right? And that's at the highest level. You see that happen. So it trickles all the way up and down the socioeconomic status. So, okay, so now you've been there for a while, couple of years. You bought your grandmother a house. You're now feeling some level of security or comfort. you're what, at this age, probably about 25?
Yeah, 25, 26 at about that age. Ended up taking another role. I got promoted to specialist. So a specialist role is when you are a subject matter expert at a product. So by virtue of essentially obsessing over getting so good at this product, I became one of the best at this product and got promoted into a specialty role. And now I was doing enterprise sales for Fortune 100 companies
Mhm.
at this point, and did that for about another 2 years. And that's then it just got easy after that. I mean, I wish there was a better way to say it, but I already had about 5 years of experience in this industry. I'd gotten to know a lot of people in this industry, and tech is one of these beautiful things that once you're in it for a little bit and get to know people for a little bit, your inbox on LinkedIn is hit up 2-3 times a day from another startup or another big tech company, that wants you. And it's been easy since then. Like, it's recruiter calls you up and says, hey, we're willing to pay you this amount more to come work for us. So all that grind that I put in that 2 years of UMC just set up the rest to be easy, because now it's just been parlaying to the next job, the next job, the next job that offers, whether it's more stock options or higher pay or more reward, in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's what everyone wishes for, right? Life
Of
becomes
course.
easy and just people just start handing you more and more money. It is really uncomfortable, you know, for me, because you look at everyone else out in the world, they're struggling like to find a job, and you're in this industry in which everyone is just offering you jobs. So like some part of me has like a tug of war with like, how do I kind of
Yep.
accept that? But it got exponentially easier after that point. And I'd very much attribute that to, like, as you're, say, an actor, after you get your first big break, after that, they just keep coming to you and there's not
Yes.
much you need to do.
Well, you got to keep
That's,
executing, right? Like,
yeah,
if you fell off and got lazy and didn't continue to execute, eventually you get shuffled right out of tech and find yourself unemployed. So it's not that there's nothing to do. It's that the first big break is the hardest, right? The first getting
yeah,
your foot in the door, that is exquisitely difficult to do. And that's where the quote unquote, the grind, the hustle, the sacrifice, that's where all that comes into play, is getting that moment, that opportunity to get your foot in the door. And then once you got your foot in the door, you need to execute so that you stay in the house. Once you've built a habit of that success, of like, hey, I wake up early, I get things done, I get my workout in, I study my product, I'm always sort of challenged to be better at my job. That habit, to you, like, you don't even realize you do it. You don't realize that you dedicate time to read white paper research reports around your own products and other people's products. Like, that's because that is now your habit. That's the way eating
yeah,
breakfast is your habit. Drinking coffee is your habit. So that is what when people talk about like the habit of success, again, it sounds like a stupid trope. You're like, what does that even mean? That's what it means. This is what it means, right? Like, Rick's position is people are handing him more and more money with more and more commas in it. Millions when it comes to stock options, etc., because of your habit of success that has become so second nature to you that you don't realize it. It becomes no more difficult than drinking coffee, right? That's what that means. So when you see that stupid motivational poster or trope out that Gary Vee talks about, like, this is a human that's actually doing and executing on that thing. So there's a good truthism to pull out of this conversation is, he built his life. Sorry to talk about you in the third person, Rick, but built his life on this sort of habit of building this success formula. And it wasn't super sophisticated. Like, you could use a crayon, right? Like, wake up early, don't party all night long, don't show up at work drunk, study, become obsessed with my product, no more than everybody else, be likable and affable, add value to my boss and my customers, repeat every day. Repeat every day. Don't call out sick. Don't be a bitch. Get to work. Sounds super obvious. Okay, cool. Do that for 5 years. I guarantee you I guarantee you, I don't care if you're a pipe fitter, I don't care if you're a barista, you put that work in 5 years, you are going to be exponentially multiple times ahead from your career, your relationship, your business, all of it will get better. Sounds easy. It's just a quick 5 years of not screwing up. That's all you got to do. Right. So I say that with all sarcasm intended. So, okay. So and then you make the switch to I wouldn't say 800-pound gorilla, I'd say 800-ton gorilla. AWS, right? Amazon Web Services. And would you give a little commercial as to what AWS is? Because despite how mega AWS is, like I find a lot of people, when you say AWS, they kind of smile and nod, but they have no idea what it actually is and what it means.
Yeah, AWS is the #1 cloud provider in the world. So when you think of cloud, it's basically just compute services delivered on demand in a pay-as-you-go model. So when you look at things like your Netflixes, your Airbnbs of the world, all powered by AWS. So it's just a different way of the supply chain. Instead of buying computer assets, self-assembling them and building out what you need, it's just using them as you need them and paying for them when you use them, essentially. Mm-hmm. That's the easiest way to look at cloud.
Of the ones that you can disclose, give me a couple big names that use AWS.
I mean, the ones that are really big public right now, like, you have Netflix, Lyft, GEs, FINRAs. I mean, if you look at the case studies, there's hundreds. It's you interact with it every day, and you're unbeknownst to it. Everything needs to be powered by some computer software or hardware, and a lot are powered by us. We're one of many, but
so when you look at how much, people look at Jeff Bezos and go, okay, he's a trillionaire, he's the richest guy in the whole world, and blah blah blah. Of Amazon's profit, give me just a percentage. Like how much of Amazon, the mega company, does AWS, the cloud computing side, contribute to Amazon's bottom line? Is it 1%? Is it 10%? What is it?
Not even sure. I'm sure if you could Google that real quick and find out.
If you had to make a guess.
Substantial.
Yeah. Like more than half
I presume. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did Google it. There's some conflicting information because it's a little harder to pull apart than you might think, but it's anywhere between 50 and 70% of Amazon's value is not created shipping you groceries and HDMI cables. It's actually through AWS. It's the lion share, right? So AWS is to Amazon as the iPhone is to Apple, right? They sell a lot of products, they sell a lot of stuff. Without the iPhone, they would be a shell of what they are today, right? Because it's just such a huge staple in their portfolio. And you do some pretty cool stuff with AWS, and you get to work in the startup space and specifically within gaming and get to do some amazing things now. And this is a good place to sort of end the show in that, we've talked about where you are today, and then we went through this journey of this incredibly difficult childhood where not only, did you not have any privileges, you had the opposite. You only had horrific challenges, far more challenges than anyone should have. And you made one seemingly small decision, which is effectively the choice between good and evil, the choice between, am I going to be a statistic? Am I going to be a druggy flunky? Or am I going to go get after it? Well, if those are my two options, both are hard, right? If you're a druggy flunky, life is hard. If you're super successful, life is hard. Choose your heart. Choose which one you're going to do. And you're like, okay, I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm going to go after it. I have no skills, presumably, right? You get through high school, you go to college for all 5 minutes. You don't have a background in these things. And yet, through just plain dedication, having a plan, and executing week in and week out for about 5-6 years. If I'm trying to do the math here, from 19 to 24, 25 is when things started getting better for you. That's 5 years of just executing with really no idea if it's going to pay off. But clearly it did in a really meaningful and successful way.
Yeah, man. I think, people ask what would you attribute to your success? And I said, you just have to be stubborn. You know, you got to be willing to eat shit every day for 5 years, because eventually you're not. You know, I mean, if you look at,
Right.
you know, the CEO of Starbucks, he presented 236 times to VCs and got shot down every time. 237th time, he didn't. Starbucks is a thing right now. I mean, it's so easy to look at like an Elon Musk, but I mean, there's thousands of people that try to get in there and failed too. He just happened to be the one that got through the other side.
Right.
So, and I come back to what, you know, what Jocko says, you know, it's discipline equals freedom. And there's this connotation that we put on discipline. It's, you know, discipline is this bad thing. Like, you discipline your children, or you've been disciplined to do this. Nah, you just got to be willing to do the same shit every day and expect a different result. I mean, it is by virtue the definition of insanity. But when you give up, well, it's done.
Yes.
So you just have to realize, like, well, if I give up, I fail myself. But if I don't give up, then there's still a chance that something good might happen. And kind of go back to what you said on the other piece is, people say, oh, well, my story's different. My story's different. I'll tell you what, people have had way worse lives than me, right? Like, I'm not going to claim that mine is the worst. I don't think it was great, apparently, from the feedback I hear. But people have it worse. And as soon as you start thinking like that, like, you give yourself an excuse. Like, you give yourself an excuse to fail. So when you do fail, you can then go, well, I failed because. No, it's just, failure's not an option. Like, I don't remember if it was Goggins or who said this, but I always just love this quote. Is like, there is no plan B because of distraction plan A. Just work plan A.
Yes.
And just be maniacal about it. And when you lose or get kicked in the teeth, and just go, all right, well, how else do I get around that? What's the other way? I mean, you know, people that say they're self-made, no one's self-made. They got friends along the way. Something happened along the way. I'm one of them. I wouldn't say I'm self-made. I had a lot of mentors and people that helped me out, picked me up off the ground. But all the self-help books and the seminars and The Secret and just all that bullshit, you just got to be willing to go through it. And that's it. Like, that is the key to life. Just keep going.
Yes.
You know, and unfortunately, some people will keep going and never get a reward, but some do.
Yeah.
But you got to stay in the fight.
I mean, so I couldn't agree more. If and I talk about this all the time, if we look at the bell curve of distribution, right? Luck being the bell curve of distribution, right? So you've got this bell curve. So some people are super, super, super crazy lucky, right? They just, everything good happens to them all the time. And then some people, everything bad happens to them all of the time. But that bell curve shows us that the vast majority, greater than 70% of us, fall somewhere in the middle, which means if you just keep doing it day in and day out, it might happen to Susan in 1 year of her grinding, and it might happen for Bobby in 10 years of grinding, but it will happen if you put the time in. And from my investment experience in investing in founders, what I have found is it is definitely not money. If a founder is well funded, that's usually bad for them, not good for them. If they come from an Ivy League background, I look down upon that. And the reason is because their education is fantastic, but in order for someone to excel, to get into Harvard, MIT, Yale, Dartmouth, etc., it means that they have to have not faced what, in my opinion, and maybe Rick's opinion as well, meaningful challenges. Because it is statistically very unlikely that you have a broken home and someone excels at getting into MIT and out the other side. The statistical evidence shows that you have an intact family that's middle income or above, and they have time to bring you to sports programs and tutoring and doing all these things. And school is very pragmatic, right? You get an outline, you get a syllabus, you know what you have to learn, when you have to learn it, et cetera. Well, then you get into the real world and you try to run a startup and you realize, oh, there's no rule book at all. There's no syllabus. There's no anything. There's no direction. I'm faced with all these challenges I've never experienced before. They fold, right? And so one of the things I look for when I invest is I want someone who's irrational. I want someone who is what I call unreasonable. I don't want them to be a rational and reasonable person when it comes to their goals. Because if they're rational, after they faced a couple of challenges, they'd go get a job at Starbucks. They'd be like, this sucks. I'm not doing this, right? I want the person who is irrational, that is so obsessive about this thing that they're just going to keep going or they're going to die on the vine, right? That odd combination of creative problem solving and grit is what makes an Elon Musk, right?
You got to be
I
willing
mean,
to be unrealistic, man. I mean, that was one of the greatest things that, I'd ever heard is being realistic is the most commonly traveled road to mediocrity, So just like
100%.
be unrealistic, just
Yes.
if someone says it can't be done, then it's just, well, it can't be done yet. And I'll show you. Right.
Right.
And, so you can always tell when someone has that mindset of like by hook or crook, they're getting it done. Or when you hear that CEO stand up and say, hey, I need $5 million in blank series funding. And they ask him, well, what are you going to use it for? I need to hire a sales team. You are the sales team, like by virtue, like
Yes.
that is you.
Yes.
And so you can usually spot when someone has it. And, the one thing I've never been able to figure out is like, how do you get that fire? How do you get that motivation to think like that? And I think, for some of us like you and I, is you just have to go through things and just have that moment where something snaps in you and you realize that you want more. And for others, you got to search that out. Like you got to find out like, what's that thing? For me, it was this psychiatrist. And then also just kind of that thought in my head of like, hey, like my mom can't be here to see this, but like if she could, would she be proud of what she's seeing? So people always want to focus on what they want, but what you got to figure out first is like, why, like, why do you want it? What's going to motivate you? And then just don't do anything that gets in the way of the why. And it's so easy, man. Like it's so easy, like to go party and go do all these different things, but you're not going to be still partying when you're 40. Right. So like a lot of these decisions you make early, it's going to tee up what the back half is going to be like. So I just think very long-term and very rational.
I love it, man. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I know you're not big on the socials. So normally this is where I give you a plug and say, hey, go follow this person. But that's not really your thing. So in lieu of that, if you could direct anybody, people who connected with your story, if you could direct them to other people that you do find inspiration from or mentorship from, a book, an influencer, share with the people some of the stuff that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two biggest books that I'm reading right now is Sun Tzu, Art of War. I read it on repeat. If you've never read that book, it is so much deeper than just war itself. I mean, it might as well be just a manifesto of philosophy on how to approach everything. You can take all of those teachings and deploy it into every single method of life. Another big one is, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, where he talks about tactical empathy. Empathy is something that I never really developed at a young age by virtue of what I grew up in. So for anyone that is in that scenario where it's, hard to be empathetic or it's hard to, kind of get those feelings teased out, he does it in a really, really logical way to explain how to develop and use, empathy and the positive. Those are my two favorites. I read them on repeat, night and day, every day. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm definitely on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me, respond to everybody, and mentor a few people. So always happy to mentor more if they're willing to actually do it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
People talk about a lot of stuff, but no one actually wants to put in the effort.
I mean, I've got endless stories about people who've reached out to me through Instagram DMs looking for me to mentor them. And I'm the one who ends up following up with them because they fall off so quickly because they're not willing to put in the work. Right. And I look, I don't want to give up. I continue to help people wherever I can, like Rick is willing to do, but you have to be willing to put in the work. So I appreciate that. Everybody, thank you so much for enjoying the show. As always, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. It really helps. As you can see, we don't sell anything. We take no advertising dollars. We do this to make it as pure as possible. The only thing that we ask is that you spread the love. If you got something out of this, please share it with a friend, a loved one, etc. To find more about me and what's going on in upcoming shows, pierrerogers.com. Everything is there. Or you can find me on the Instagrams at Pierre Rogers. Until next time, everybody.